And thank you to so many staff for staying with us. It's very nice to have you here with us through this meeting. We try not to bore you too much. I will start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the people whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. If anyone has one to declare, you can do so at any time throughout the meeting. Are there any additional items for the agenda today? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors approve the agenda of December 19th, 2023. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Member Bell? Member Farmer? Is there any discussion? Yes, Member Backey?
No, I was just going to vote in favor, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll call the vote on.
I was distracted by the back.
That's carried. Approval of the minutes. The recommendation that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors approve the full authority minutes of November 22nd, 2023. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Mackey, Vice Chair Gregg. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Business out of the minutes, there is none at this time. The consent agenda. Does anyone have an item to pull out of that consent agenda? I just have a question about the minutes from the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and the only question is, I know that Member Maxwell was making motions there, but is not listed as being in attendance at that meeting. So I don't think it's anything needs discussion, maybe just a quick correction on those minutes if good. Or do we have to send that back to that advisory committee?
I don't think we discussed stuff at that meeting. Unless I'm.
October 27th? Have you had these?
We've had a meeting since then.
Yes, I know. I always have to backtrack how many meetings ago.
Yeah, so these are the minutes we approved in the November.
Okay, so we'll just make a note there, so we don't need to pull those for discussion. So seeing nothing else, the recommendation is that in consideration of the consent agenda items listed on the December 19th, 2023 agenda, the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receives the following items. 1, environmental planning, section 28 permits and planning, November 2023. 2 is administration, receipts and expenses, November 2023. What did we get?
December.
Not sure. Apparently I'm missing something there. Okay, and December then is the next, and the minutes of GSCA Agriculture Advisory Committee minutes, October 27, 2023, and the recent media articles. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Durst? I have to think first names first. Get the last name, sorry. Member During. Is there any discussion on, no, we don't need further discussion, my apologies. All in favor? That is carried, thank you. Board orientation, water management. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Oh, wrong one. That work?
That slideshow.
There we go.
It's spoiled by massive screen.
GSCA. Is that as big as it gets? Good. Okay, so, I'm here to keep you awake for the next hour or so. So, I'm gonna introduce you to some of the programming that, falls under my department, which is underwater. So just, real quick, dams are under my department, but we've been there, done that back in June, so we'll do it again in June. So I'm not gonna cover dams today, so that'll save us a few minutes. Flood forecasting, stay tuned for part 2. I will take a break after the watershed monitoring part before I get into flood forecasting questions. Just on with what happens under watershed monitoring. For us, some of you might think of just the water chemistry samples we do or the benthic, but we actually collect culvert data. We collect flow data, that could be measured data and also descriptive data, like lots of flow at the site or it could be ponding or even dry. We collect fish data, both stuff that's collected with equipment and the species, or we just have fish noted at the site, which is really important for when people tell us that there's no fish. At least we have somebody who says, yeah, 3 years ago we saw fish there. So let's get off the project. Field parameters such as pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, temperature, and clarity. And the water chemistry, the benthic. We also do groundwater monitoring as part of our program. And we do monitoring that supports the flood forecasting program, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So when you think of all that data that we collect, one of the biggest challenges is how do you organize that it's available in a meaningful way. So this is kind of a quick shot at the back end of our database that we have for managing our watershed data. So it's a relational database, meaning you have a whole bunch of tables that link to each other. So it works well that way. And it's a database that's actually, the middle of it is, the station part of it. So everything links through the station. So you have a station with coordinates. The station, you visit the site, so you would record some field parameters when you visit the site. And while you're there, you would do multiple different programs such as benthic, water sampling, fish sampling, flows. You can do multiple programs all at once. So the database does a really good job of capturing and storing it and organizing it in such a way that the stations, when they're geo-referenced with coordinates, all that data can be exported out and loaded up on other maps. It's also linked to our own staff's projects in the office, so they have direct access to all the data that's in this database. And we also can summarize it by municipality because all the stations are linked to a municipality, so we can do very quickly municipal reports as to what we collected and where. And then we can also summarize by the water course or with the sub-watershed, the main basins, or even the sub-basins. So it's a very powerful little database that we developed about 20 years ago to capture all this data. So how many stations we have? We have within the database over 11,000 stations. The goal at the time was to generate the stations ahead of time, pre-populate the database, so that when people came back with data, they could very quickly link it up. The station numbers that are within the database. So that was a challenge in itself. We had a lot of summer students that were helping to input this data. We had co-op students from high schools. We even had international co-op students that could hardly speak English help us to populate this database. So it was quite an accomplishment at the time. And it was very unique, because our CA had a system like this developed, and other CAs were just dreaming of it. So it was really nice to get this developed, and it's just been a real help along the years to work with the data. So one of the goals we had with our summer students, we used to get summer students from the Ministry of Natural Resources. We got them for free. We get them for 14 weeks every summer, and we would then send them out to find every culvert in the road that they could find. So that was a really good project for them. They would georeference the culverts, collect data on them, and then it would definitely give us all this information as to we're looking for culvert sizing. Somebody wants to propose a culvert, we can just click on a map and get the culvert size. So it was good for the students. They got to know our watersheds. We generally would just, it would take about 5 years to do a complete round of all the road systems within our watershed. So we would send the student out and say, this year you're doing Town Blue Mountains. Next year, the next student would do a different region. So we would cycle through 5 years. And then after that, we would cycle through again, because sometimes they miss things, and sometimes things get recorded improperly. So it was a very good system. Unfortunately, we don't have those students anymore. The province took away that program from us 5 years ago. So we haven't had any summer students since. So when they were at the culverts, they would describe the flow data, which could be lots, trickle, ponding, or even dry. That would get recorded in the database. They would also, if it was flowing, they would take a temperature of the stream, or they would put in data loggers so that we could do a thermal classification of the water course. And that would mean we would classify it as cold, cool, or warm. So that would just kind of describe the fish species that could survive there. And we have fish data as well. And like I mentioned, some of that is just fish noted. But we also have data from M&R's files where we actually have electrofishing programs and monitoring. So really powerful stuff we have in that database. And as I mentioned earlier, we do the water chemistry sampling. That's probably what you probably see us doing the most when we're out in the field. You can see a picture of Elaine taking a sample. Elaine, leave me. Here's Elaine. Yeah. So Elaine helps me with the monitoring side of this program. She takes the water samples and submits them to the lab. We do 10 sites with our partnership with the Ministry of the Environment, plus another 25 sites that are ours for our own programming. And this water quality data is available on our website. This is actually a clip from our website product. And just click on the icons, it'll take you to summarized data for the last 5 years, and there's also a link to see the historical data. So it's a well-used tool. And then I summarize just of 4 of the main parameters that we look at. These sites are also coincide with the benthic program. So we do benthic sampling. This is my poor daughter on Take Your Child to Work Day. So I put her to work, and she didn't know I did this, but she took some samples. She was doing the picking, so it's something that it's actually can be fun to do for the first couple of weeks. After that, it gets a little tedious. We're basically picking out all the new and different bugs for one of the protocols, and under another protocol, we pick out everything in a subsample. The critters go into alcohol for storage, and then we identify them in the wintertime when we get time. So something that we did 2 years ago, we picked up a microscope with a camera feature on it. So with COVID, it was really tough to train staff in the same room. So what we were looking at doing was doing the training over the internet. So I would work the microscope, and you would be at the other end working the keys and stuff and getting familiar with what I was talking about. So I'm just going to play a quick video. What we've done was we've opened that session up to anybody that's interested. So we've invited the conservation authorities over the province to sit in on our sessions too, for anybody that's interested in some training. So hopefully this works.
Well, this is hydropsyche. He's got, for caddisflies, he's free living. The back of his thoracic segments all have plates. So there's 3 of them. And when we look underneath him, we will see these 2 plates kind of right there. So if you have those 2 plates and the back's all 3 plates, and you know he's a certain group. And then we have keys that take them down to species. So the genus, the name genus keeps changing in the literature. So I don't. That there used to be hydropsyche. So this guy, that's interesting, Elaine. He's well, of course, he's a 13-year-old sample, so light brown. He might have been darker before. So he's got that definite center spot, and then he's got another spot behind him. So right away we key out to that picture key there. And on my cheat sheet, I just have a circle with the number beside it, so it's 287 for the central circle. I can have with this genus, I could have up to 5 different species in the same sample. So I've spent some time just learning them. So again, I got another guy here with the back plates are all 3 are there, but he's got a little notch on his nose. So when you're looking at the nose area, and you'll also see on the first thoracic segment, that corner setae is usually quite long. I don't know if you can see him on that one, Elaine.
There it is.
There it is, yeah. And he will not have those plates underneath. Or if he does, I got something new and different. So, so this guy does not have those plates. And there's a couple other features here, but he's Chimatopsyche. So unfortunately, I don't have keys to take them down to species. I just have the genus level. Well, this is hydropsyche.
So all the water chemistry and the benthic data, it eventually goes into our watershed report cards and helps support the watersheds. And as you can see here, we've done 4 so far. We put those out every 5 years. So we have over 20 years of data that's gone into these report cards.
John, how big is that little critter?
4 or 5 feet. Yeah. And it's not like that big one I showed in that other video. They're usually about that big.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a very common group for our watersheds. So you get to know them quite well. The other program we have the groundwater monitoring, and again, this is one that's done in partnership with the Ministry of the Environment, and we have 10 wells within our watershed that we maintain the loggers that are in them and download the files and send those off to MOE, CP, and then we also once a year, mostly in the fall, we do water sampling at all the wells. So it takes a while to actually develop the well and pump it on enough volumes so you can actually take the sample. So you can see Elaine's, this is our well at, it's a Wagner Marsh well, but it's at the top of the escarpment. So it's an old windmill well. You can see the water tank there beside it. So it's, this is on one of our properties. Okay, any questions?
As a fun coincidence, I can't help but wonder if the electrofishing data that I gathered in the 1990s as an MNR summer student might be part of your database now. But that's not my question. I was.
You want me to look it up?
Totally with all right. Do you collect data? It wasn't on that first page about chlorides.
Yeah. Yes. So the actual map I showed was the chloride values, like the one with the blue dots.
I feel like you could come here to talk a little bit about chlorides with, especially with our first snow. Is there anything from a municipal perspective we should be thinking about in terms of using salt on our roads and other buildings?
Yeah, so you definitely want to try to reduce it as much as you can, but there is that safety factor. So you have to apply enough to make sure that you're not, people are getting hurt. What I've seen in the data, we have some that are only short-term data, so we're only 10 years old. So there's a very slight rise going on in the recent years due to some of the chloride levels. But when I look back at the sites that have a long history, there was a bit of a peak went on in the 80s, and actually it's coming down now.
Okay.
So it's basically, you know, wise use of the resource, and it's showing up in the data. And our levels in our jurisdiction, I'm not talking about one sound draining, because they do have a lot of sulfurs on the hill for safety. But in the stream systems, our chloride levels are actually quite low compared to potential sites eventually.
That's great to see here. I do pay attention, but I have been noticing it in the news more as well. Thank you.
Do you mind if I add something?
Go ahead, please, Ron.
A little plug here for the soil protection program, but we're under the soil protection plan. We do have salt management policies. And so we're now actually working with all municipalities, ensuring that we have all the best practices and salt management plan and principles in place. And that's within the soil protection area, but we're talking more broadly, obviously, with municipalities to say what other vulnerable areas like wetlands can you apply those same principles. So something that we're
Thank you. Member Bell, please.
Thank you. So I would assume that when you take a look at water with a microscope and there's a lot of life in the water, that that's a good sign. Would that be a fair assumption that stuff is living and it's a good environment?
Yeah, in general, you don't want a lot of E. coli in the water sample. That's usually indicating that there's some fecal matter in there. But one of the biotic indexes we have with the bugs is the more varied. So the more different taxa that you have in the sample, the better. So it's not all dominated by one group. So and again with the benthic, there's all different ways to look at it. They're telling us something, but we just sometimes don't know the questions to ask. It's a huge learning curve trying to get a sense what they're actually giving to you. The nice thing with our program is we're going down to genus and species. So that means that data in the future is available to anybody that wants to apply any kind of index to it. It's not all conservation.
For your,
So those 11,000 plus stations that were set up, how long did it actually take? How long have they actually been in place? How long did that take to do that?
So over the years, but it's probably 3 years of work to develop it. The challenge at the time was we envisioned what we wanted to do, especially with the students, and with the GIS software that came along, and else that was coming into place. We said this is what we want for the future. So it includes road crossing, but also stream mouths. So that's why there's so many. So that I could tag a report to our full watershed with the stream mouths. So it was a slow process, quite tedious. But we had a system in place that we just would plug away at it, get a system done, great, we had it done, and then take advantage of any other people that we could find out there. So it is quite unique.
so Member Dubek and then Member Farmer, please.
Thank you. So now that we no longer have a student program, I'm just wondering if there's any consequences or risks that we need to be aware of.
The challenge is the data is now becoming dead. So it's not being refreshed with new data. So we do add to it slowly. So when the site visits, planning of the month, they would visit the site or they would visit somebody upstream and data can be added to it. But the challenge is drainage features change, type of thing. So the small systems get a little more challenging to keep a tab on. So students are really nice, and it's a great program to keep them busy and active and really understand how things work within the watershed.
Building on that, that many data point or points of collection is eye-watering to me. Like, that's a lot. Is that number still useful going forward without the ability to refresh and knowing that we don't have the MNR student source anymore? Is there an opportunity to partner with post-secondary institutions who need to deal with or with students who need field work experience?
If somebody comes to me for free, I know where I want to put them. The data's still good. Like the culvert data's great. I know the municipalities, we just recently, sent the whole block of data to, Georgia Bluffs. Yeah, Georgia Bluffs asked for it. Some of us probably don't know we have this. And so we try to send it off, whenever we can. The thermal data is what I'm more concerned about. I wanna make sure we're on top of that. So that's usually an indicator that if something's changed, if something either was really good happened in the watershed or something really bad as far as, and it's on small systems. Big systems are fairly robust in that they don't change quickly. So it's small systems, the country streams and stuff that are more sensible. So it's nice to try to plug away at it. The system's all set up to accept it. It's just finding the bodies to consistently do it.
Vice Chair Greg, go ahead.
One particular question, and also just note, appreciate the comments about the votes out, Carl and John. I certainly have spoken to Carl many times over the years, and I'm a firm believer I do not want Toronto rules thrust down our throat. On sound when it comes to monitoring and maintaining our level of need, and on sound, and I see the vehicles slide down hills sideways, and the elderly population that needs to be able to travel on the sidewalks in a safe manner. So it's a necessity that's greater than sometimes what we see from different levels of government when they're trying to place different rules in place. And we're not in the 80s anymore, certainly, where we're just placing it out like it was never going to disappear from stock. You mentioned 11,271 sites with stations. Is there a cost to that? What's the ultimate number that would be, I guess, the perfect number? Has that been growing still over time? Does it get to a point where it's just not serviceable? Or is there a cost to
No, there's no cost to it. Like the big time cost was back 20 years ago. It's still, like, one thing I think I forgot to mention, we also include stations for points of interest. So springs and shore wells, karst features, so all that can be incorporated in the database as well. So the database can keep growing. It's just a matter of, making sure when that information is collected that it's, we gotta get that database. So it's available for everybody else. So it's trying to get things out of the head onto paper.
Yeah.
Member Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. John, I'm not sure if this is for you or for Ian or for planning, but a lot of the culverts have been in the ground for an awful long time. And with the amount of tile draining that's going on in the countryside, is there any indication whether they were sized properly to accommodate all this additional flow that they're receiving from the land?
Yeah, typically, outlets that are in municipal roads, historically, they would just be sized to pass the spring runoff. And if they didn't have flooding issues, then they didn't add any more to it. So they were never really sized. It was just, let's try a 2-footer and see if that works. But the tile drainage now, it tends to add more to the base flow. And if we're having a bad storm event, it can add more to the storm event. There's times where it's relieving water off the land when I'm not having a problem, which is okay. But it's when I'm having a flood problem and it's still relieving water off the land, and that's when it creates more problems. So, but as far as culverts go, the thing we just need to watch is raising the roads and not increasing culvert capacity. So at that point, you're raising the dam that could cause flooding upstream. We are fortunate we have not had a significant rain event dump on our larger watersheds and see the results for our. Probably Hurricane Hazel was the last time we had something that was consistently dumped in our watershed, and it wasn't a big storm when it got up. So it caused problems, but we've been fortunate that we seem to be missing some of those systems. So it's
Williamsford, Victor.
yeah. For us at our watershed, So that was, you know, that's a storm, that's a spring melt with a rain event. That's our scariest scenario right now. So every spring, that's when I'm the most nervous. And I haven't gotten my flood forecasting app here, so.
I guess I should have said Williams Lake today.
Yeah, Williams Lake is in there, yes.
The CAO.
Just for a clarification on those stations that John mentioned, there's not a physical station on the ground there that we're maintaining. It's just a point on a map, and there's a point in the database that corresponds with it.
With our growing education department, are there possibilities that could be considered regarding citizen science if we're looking for a temperature of certain places? Possibly a neighbor could monitor. I know it's not always ideal.
We have had in the past a volunteer program for people submitting water temperature data. So we're all set up to accept it. Just need volunteers. So, COVID slowed us down a lot. We just weren't out like we were. So it's probably a point in time we're trying to reach out to these groups. We've had like the Beaver River Watershed Initiative. They helped us do a thermal study of the Little Beaver River that they're doing work on now. So there's all kinds of opportunities. Just finding people that want to do it.
Yeah, and I know that takes somebody to run the program.
Question I would have for you, John, is who is this information most relevant to? And is that an area where we could reach out to look for funding? And I guess maybe backtrack, what would it cost to bring this back up to a certain level? Say current data.
So we're probably the biggest user of this data. So that's why we collected. So it was for, at the time, we were just going into the Department of Fisheries and Oceans agreement with DFO to do the fish habitat review. So what we want to know for that is we're going to be working with culverts, so we want culvert information. We want to know where there's fish. So when people tell us there's no fish, it doesn't flow, we can at least have a database sitting there saying, hey, we know there's fish there. That changes the whole review that we were going to go through and change the projects. So it was important to us. So going forward, we're probably still the primary use. Except when, let's say, the municipality wants to change a culvert and they want to know, is there fish here? But what should we do? So we can at least look at the database and say, hey, we know that site dries up, so you've probably got an opportunity in the summertime to do it. Right.
I now know why we wanted that information. Okay.
So it's very powerful information, and
We've
it's
got
not,
a bridge to replace.
yeah, not everybody, not all the CAs have this technical information.
Okay, I guess I was just thinking in terms of Georgian Bluffs getting that data, but by what you said, that explains it to me, because we've got a couple of bridges to replace. When can we do that at the best time? So I guess where I was further going with it is that a potential partner to help pay to make sure that data keeps up to the standard it should through? So are there any other questions for John?
So this is another question. I'm just going to, just a quick comment. I'm going to just build what Tibble was saying. You know, you have all these like citizen science endeavors. And I think we need an app, right, to get people, you know, out there measuring. And it's just, you know, I think there is a very strong grassroots, you know, citizen base that does love to get involved and just a proponent.
See, Alex is that.
Thank you. Alex, Member Maxwell, please go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of the water monitoring, the data loggers, I do believe Eugenia Lake Cod Association were collecting data in cooperation with the Great Sauble Conservation Authority, I believe. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware they're doing a small study there, and we are sitting on, I wouldn't call it a steering committee, but they have let me sit in on their preliminary data review that they just had. So I could provide some comments to them as to thoughts I might have, and other potential areas that they could be looking at. They haven't released that information yet from this year.
Thank you very much, because we inherited all the water from Eugenia Lake eventually and down the Blue Mountains. Thank you.
Just quickly, also, John, following up on some of the conversation about citizen groups, could you comment on the input that Spring Creek or the Hepworth Anglers and Fisheries group does? Because they've been beneficiaries of some significant grant funding over the years in terms of the work and restoration that they do on Spring Creek. And they do a lot of extensive monitoring. Is that something that provides value to your department as well?
Spring Creek is basically it's part of the Sauble River system. There's a huge upwelling that provides almost a third of the base flow of the Sauble River, Spring Creek. They own the majority of the actual stream bottom, which is kind of unique and different. So the water's cold, but it has an oxygen issue with it. So there's something going on there that they've been trying to deal with. And then they're also concerned about, trying to maintain the base flow through the system. So there's a lot of different interactions that go on up in that area, especially with all the karst that's up there that feeds the system. So they've been successful, some good grants, and they actually, my second half of my presentation, they actually share.
Spoiler alert.
They actually share their data from their weather station with us. So I was only kidding about being an hour. So
Member Yuri?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you talk about the student programs drawing up, the only reason I think of this is that I know that our citizens, we have some amazing volunteers out there who are willing to kind of do things. And again, it's all about education and even knowledge that these things exist. I'm just wondering if we ever put out calls to volunteers that they'd be interested in doing some of this stuff, and whether that would be possible, because I don't know how intensive or extensive the work you need to be done at the data points, but is it possible? I think just recently, and this is a thank you as well, GSCA, because I think of Meaford, the Trout Hollow Trail, GSCA just granted permission for them to reroute a trail. So we had a number of volunteers go out who are very interested in, maintaining and furthering nature as a general concept. And I know that some of those people, given an opportunity, I don't even know where they are. So I don't know whether access is a problem, whether it's related to that, or whether just volunteerism would be a potential solution towards future information gathering.
Volunteers are great when you have them and they're excited to do something, but it can be inconsistent. So that's the challenge. So it's always good to have, if you got a monitoring program, you want to make sure you've got a core program that's going forward, and then you've got some other inputs coming in from volunteers or other sources. But you still need that core program. So if you really want it to go. So volunteers, you might get somebody, they go your way, you might be on one of the streams. I'm going to get that stream, that's all. So it's really nice when we had the students going around, that was great data that we were getting. All it was costing us was mileage. So it's unfortunate that program. So, and we tried to apply to other programs, we just don't seem to be top of the priority list for them. So it might be just trying to be a little more inventive as to what we're doing. But coordinating volunteers does take time to do. So it's you get what you get, and I take everything I can get.
Member Maxwell, I see your hand up. Is that a new question or?
Oh, that's a ghost hand. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Good? Okay. I gotta go back to those. That one good?
Oh, it looks like it's two separate screens on the owl. It's funny.
But not presenter. There we go. Okay, I'm sorry, but this one's a little longer. If you're a data geek, you're gonna like this. So the other main program that's underwater is flood forecasting and warning. So 5 years ago, when we started our strategic plan process, this was one area that we evaluated. And we're asking ourselves, well, what's the strength to our flood forecasting program? Well, the strength was we had that knew the watersheds, knew their personality, knew how they reacted to rain events and snow melts. The weakness was that we had just one staff person that knew how they reacted and how they behaved and all that stuff. So the goal here was to try to build something better that's available that other staff or people can look at and make an educated decision as to whether or not we're going to have some kind of a flood issue. So our goal was to, one was to automate our system so that it wasn't manual all the time. The two was to improve the coverage of our monitoring. And the three was to make sure that this information was getting up to the public. So that was the main goals. And first thing we did, we went out and looked to see if there's anything free out there. So always looking for free products, free software to use. Try not to increase the cost of our programming. So we were out, I was Googling one time on YouTube and I came across this Get Real Time software. Free software, it's an American product. Nobody knows about it, but it's exactly what we'd be looking for. It's a flood forecasting software tool that does a lot, and it's a really amazing little piece of software. Auto Hotkeys, that's another software that's free that helps to automate any Windows program, which is very powerful. You also can make hotkeys if you click on a hotkey. System Scheduler, that's just a simpler way to schedule our tasks. Hyperterminal is a little program that was on the Windows XP computers that we brought forward to Windows 10. And that's for polling our modems that are street gauges. OFAT, that's a province of Ontario product where they software will delineate watersheds and also calculate different storm events for those watersheds. So it was a good tool. And then we used software that comes on our computers like Notepad, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access. I know we pay for those in the long run, but they're on all everybody's computers. And then Google products such as Google Drive and Gmail and My Maps. You've seen a couple of those already. So online networks that we were going to look at, Environment Canada has a few, so they have their radar system. And for us, we use Exeter. We also look at King City and RIT. Unfortunately, we're not in a prime spot for any of those. We're on the outskirts of all those radar images. But we do focus on Exeter just because it picks up the storms that come at us from the southwest. Water Survey of Canada has stream gauges throughout our network, so that's good. That's always been very powerful information to have. And at the time, that was all we had. And then weather stations and Environment Canada has the closest one, and one everybody here probably knows about is Wyerton, is Environment Canada weather station, but they also had a few volunteers within our watersheds. Then a little more looking through using Google, we came across Underground Network. This is probably the biggest network of real-time weather stations in the world. And these aren't professional units, these are basically what I call toys, but they're reporting in real time all the time. Tempest is another one. WeatherLink is a Davis Instrument product. Meso West, that's an American network. We have a few people up here that are reporting to it. Well, Sound Airport's a prime example of that. TopoRAS, so there's citizen science. There's your volunteers that are collecting rain gauge data and submitting it daily. So that's a really good network, and we really invest a lot of effort into that one. And then the Hobo, that's the one that Spring Creek Anglers they're using for their weather station. And they're nice units, but they need to be shared and we need to have their protection. So we have 3 of them in our watershed that are actually sharing their data with us. For snow, NOAA puts out a nice product, and we also tap into any kind of webcam network that's out there. So what we have ourselves that we put out or that we are maintaining correctly, we have 2 called GOES offers. So they're actually units that transmit to the GOES satellite. So every hour they grab the data and transmit it up the satellite, which NOAA takes off the satellite and we grab it from NOAA. We have 1 Sutron 8210 data logger with photo modem. That's our Terra gauge. That's getting outdated, but it's still quite functional. We've invested in some smaller units called AquaSwift. They're cell phone units as well as the Solus ones. They're also cell phone units. So they transmit by data, and then we capture that information. We have over 20 COCORAS volunteers in our watershed, and we have 15 Wonderground or those SCOI weather stations out there that different volunteers are hosting for us. So we've contributed a few stations to fill holes that we see in our watershed. And then we have a brand new climate station in the Arboretum that is also transmitting to the GOES satellite. So that's all our network. Okay. So we try to share this the best we can to the public. Here's some of the maps you will see on our website. And they're Google Maps, so they're free, and they're basically just maps of links. So I'll talk about the snow data one first. So this is a little more relevant now. There's some new data going into it. The red dots are our own sites. So we twice a month we take snow surveys and we input that data into an Access database, and we chart it. So what you can see here, the most important part is what snow load we're carrying near the spring. So the more water content we have in the snow, the more worried I am when springtime comes. So in this example, we were carrying a water content higher than average. But that year, our snow depth was higher than average, but we did have a nice spring. So, but it's always, what is the potential? So that's what flood forecasting is about. So as mentioned, we take core samples in the field, we measure the depth, and then we measure the weight of the core. The scales actually calibrated to tell us how many centimeters of water in the core sample. So fairly simple to do. Goes into an Access database. The Access database feeds Excel. Excel makes a really nice chart. Excel has a nice feature that publishes the chart to our Google Drive. And then once it's in Google Drive, you can share the link to the website. So it works quite well. So that's kind of the same process we do with a lot of our charts. So if I go back to that orange snowflake that was on the map, it'll bring up a link to this site here, which is showing the snow cover. And this is American products, it's through NOAA. But if you play with the settings and the different layers within this, you can come across one that's actually snow melt, which is really good for me. I want to know where it's melting and how fast. And if you can also toggle through the timestamps too, so you can kind of see how it progressed. And then it's all modeled, so it's not real. But it's actually, from watching this for a few years, it's actually not too bad. So it's and with the NOAA site here, I'm just going to go a little more. They calibrate their map based on sites on the ground that they're trying to get information from. Some of those sites are the COCORAS sites. So if I have a COCORAS volunteer, it's then modeling data from that site. And if that volunteer is contributing any data, it's like in this example, this person's showing snow depth. So you can see how the model is not far off. And if it's really far off, the model will adjust. So it's amazing information that we're getting for free, and it's just based on all the nice topograph sites that we have. So the more I get, the more information I get. So they do produce 8 charts. So if you're really into snow, I think it's fascinating. Then you can look this up and find out all about that, that location. So it's very informative, but it's the first 2 charts that mean the most to me because it has the information that I want. So I actually can download that data. And when I do download it, I put the 2 files together in an Excel spreadsheet, and I feed this, create this nice chart below here, and I'll explain a little bit. This is actually a snow melt and a rain event happening pretty much at the same time. So my worst fears. So we have water content of the snow is about 1.45 inches. It's melting, and as it's melting, the red line is going up, saying this is how much snow melt I'm actually getting released. The snow's pretty much gone at this point, and it's all rainfall. And so once the snow is gone, it's not melting anymore. The rainfall gets added onto it, so it gives me a really good approximation of what I'm getting for runoff. And then the peachy area is the forecasted section of that. So amazing that I have access to information like this. And what we also do is we run this into our flow model. By the way, I can publish those charts as well because it's an Excel spreadsheet. But I can put this into the flow model. So here's just an example of one of our flow models. The purple line from the top is rain event snow melt that could be going on. The red line is what our model says would happen at that spot. It was really wet out when it started. The orange line here is basically if it was average moisture content, and the green line would be like if it was a summertime event, and things were actually trying to start wet. And the blue line is the actual flow. So it just goes to show you that our model's not bad. Spring runoff for us is generally always between the orange line and the red line. It's nice that the red line, we can at least see how bad we might get. The other lines here are just thresholds. So this is the 50% percentile for the highest flows we have annually. So we would expect to see flows exceed that once every 32 years, or 50% of the time. The orange broken line is 75th percentile, and the red line is our maximum that we've ever recorded at that site. So it's a really good tool that feeds into our models very nicely, and it's all automated. So it's something that we, in the last 2 years that we've had these models, that we've had them functional and working.
That's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, I like that one too. So in this case, the model is useful.
That's something useful.
So just be careful when people say model, because it's not real data. But models can be, if they're built properly and got the right information into them, they're definitely very useful. The one challenge that we have with all our models is sometimes the forecasts aren't very good. So again, that's another model's running, and that's the biggest challenge with flood forecasting. We did garbage in is garbage out. So it's in this situation, this purple line from the top, that's actually hindcasted. So it's not a forecast number. It's something where they've looked at the satellite imagery and everything else, the radar stuff, and this is what they think really happened. So. So some of you might have seen this watershed conditions map. So this is just one way of us getting information out to the public. If you ever open up this map on the website, use a big screen. Don't use it on your phone, and turn off all the layers at once, and then just turn on the ones that you want to see. So I'm going to quickly go through the webcam one. So we have 3 webcams that we have out there in our watershed. So this is one that's at Terra, back when the bridge was still working. Where's Terra? So, we have 3 of these dots are our dots, so Terra, Allenford, and then a dam. The rest are MTOs, municipalities, and private webcams. So anything that's online that I can grab a link for, I will coordinate onto this map, so people don't have to jump around all over the place. So just an example of some of the other webcams that are out there and the quality that you can get. And Alfred's nice because I can see when the river is actually freezing over or when it's ice jammed and flooding. So Water Survey of Canada. So this is the federal government. These are links to their stream gauges. So when you go onto those sites, you can get water level and discharge, but that's all they will give you. You don't get rain event or precip or water temperature or any of that stuff. So you just get the very basics here. So that's good information to have and good to know that it's there, but we've worked on creating our own maps using their data and our own charts, and we've added some extra information into it. So this is the data that we collect on an automated process and generate hourly and put out to update the links at our website. So just a quick example, this is one of the AquaSwift units that we put in at Oliphant when the lake levels were quite high. So it was basically a temporary install, but it definitely served its purpose for us. And you can see the 3-day water levels that it recorded. And then we've got having through a few thresholds on here, the orange line being the 100-year average for September 1986. And the red line was the 100-year monthly average for October 1986, which was the highest that we've had in the last 100 years. So this, so you get a sense of where the water levels were. So really, these units, we have another one here in the Talisman floodplain. So this is right at the bridge, and so it's showing the bottom of the bridge here is the orange line, top of the bridge, or the low point in the road, which just happened to be the top of the bridge. And then we have 2 county roads that come nearby that are in the floodplain, so we have the elevations of the 2 county roads as well. Fortunately, I've never, this site's the last 5 years, we've never seen the water levels go over the bridge. So but it's a good unit, reports to us hourly, and I really like those AquaSwift units. Another unit we use is the Sauble one. It's a water level sensor attached to a telemetry unit, and it's a little more expensive than the AquaSwift, but it still gives us water level data. And we do have to correct this data with air pressure from a nearby site. And so I grab it from one of those underground gauges that have rain and air pressure, so I can add rain to the map. So it's quite handy that way. So they have a good purpose in that if that site ever completely flooded, the logger still working. So if I've lost my telemetry, I still have a logger collecting that data. So the AquaSwift ones still can't do that because they get flooded there. So here's what it looks like if I grab the Water Survey of Canada site and add the rain gauge data to it. So in this instance, the green line is the water, is the flows. And then you can see how quickly that site responds to a heavy rain event. So that's one of the reasons why I like to get this information out to the public, that they can find it, because it happens so quick, I can't get warnings out that something's going on. So a lot of our watersheds are quite flashy. The Sydenham and the Sauble are much slower, so a little more predictable as to what they'll do. But these sites like Big Head and the Beaver, they're really quick to respond. And then we also look at the water levels at that site, and we were comparing to this site is there's a private driveway nearby, so that's the elevation of the driveway, low point in the road, and then the top of the bridge deck. So different ways you can present that data. And then there's the rain gauges. This is capturing all the data for all the links to all those rain gauges I talked about earlier. Environment Canada, you go to the Warrington site and get some daily data. CocoRAS, you have the daily reports that they produce. See some of the coverage we have and some of the variability to the rain events. So those units are in inches. First one with the 0, I think they forgot to report that. Sauble Lake, so that's again, that's the Spring Creek group, City of Lone Sound has a unit that they share with us. And, group of shares on their sites. Very detailed data that they produce. Weather link, they basically, on their website, they just give you a snapshot of what temperatures are and how much rain per time. That's an idea how much weather link coverage we have. Meso West, again, that's the Owen Sound Airport. And here's that network. Then Wonderground. So Wonderground is the bread and butter of our system. So it produces some really nice charts. Also, the data itself is like 5-minute data. So it's really good for us to use when we want to reevaluate what happened with the rain event and document what kind of significant that rain was. So we summarize the data at the end of the rain storm, and we will share it out with the municipal staff that want to see that data. And if anybody here wants to see the data too, I can provide. So just an idea of what the Underground network looks like online. So it's very interactive. You can click on the sites and go to the station, but it's one of the few networks that actually show the rain number, and it updates every 5 minutes. So what I've done with all those sites is I've collected that data, put it into a database, and every hour I generate this chart for myself. So on this chart, you see 122 stations are reporting. That's significant. That's amazing. And the redundancy there is great because then I can tell when there's a station that's not reporting properly or that something's wrong. So I find this way more useful than the radar imagery. So it's, and then we do have some that are outside our watershed, but again, the storms come in from the southwest, so I want to see what's coming at it. So very good information. And because we got it all in the database, then we can generate these monthly rainfall maps, put them online. The farmers really like them for understanding how wet it was for them or how dry. We can also look at it when looking at any kind of drought response that we might be looking at. So it's great information, and we do get a lot of compliments on this feature. And then we can grab forecast rainfall based on location. And so the Spot WX network, that's a great feature for us. We do grab that data. Get real time, I'll go through this fairly quickly, but this is an amazing little piece of software that just has everything I need for flood forecasting. It just does everything I want it to do. What it does is it incorporates the data from all these networks automatically. It's built on top of an Access database, so good with Access. I can bring in text files and other types of files right into the database. I haven't found any files or anything it can't handle. So it's really good, has its own charting features. I can still put all that data to Excel, make a nice chart, publish the chart to Google Drive, send out the link to the public. So it's really everything I need for gathering the information. But another feature it has is it can actually grab radar data by watershed or by a point and put it in the database. So the radar, the watershed data, if I have a watershed polygon, it will grab that rainfall within the polygon because it's every 6 minutes with the radar. And then also the virtual point will do the same thing. The challenge with radar data is it's wrong. It has to be fixed. So the way we fix it is we have the virtual rain gauge on top of the real rain gauge. We're getting this value from the radar, getting the real value from the rain gauge. We do a correction and apply it to the whole watershed. So it's really, really powerful. And if someone told me I was going to do this, I would say, no, not my generation. I'm sorry. This is something that I couldn't believe how easily I was able to do this. So this is just an example of a rain event going through. So the yellow circles are where it's actually grabbing data. So, Get Real Time brings that all in, sits it on Access, and I just pull it in there. So it's really, it's a really amazing little tool. That's free. And the reason it's free is because, he's using free to use data for personal use only. So that's why he can't sell this product. So just
interrupt. I see Alex has his hand up here with a question.
Well, I just wanted to give you for when it's question time, that's all.
Okay, that's fine.
So last slide, I promise. So this is just a reminder, this earworm song. Where, come on.
If the water is flowing at the low water crossing, turn around, turn around. Don't risk your life, don't do it. You might not make it through it. Turn around, turn around. Might take a little time to heed the warning signs and turn around, turn around, turn around, and don't drown. If the water.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Member Maxwell, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, John. That's a great presentation on that flood management. What I wanted to ask is, but you said at the last, this program, you can't sell it because, but I was wondering, is this a possibility of a program that you can offer to a municipality?
This is probably something that the municipality, if they have specific data that they want me to flag for them, I can send to them. I generally do that myself a fair bit. One thing I haven't really mentioned is my communication with the municipalities. Whenever I see something up that I say, well, I hope that they're noticing this, I'll send the municipalities a heads up email, and that'll include the board members as well. That's not an official notification that's going to the press or anything. It's just saying, hey, it's going to be a really cool weekend. You might have some frazzle ice development. Maybe have your guys driving around, have a look at some of your problem spots. And then after that, I would do watershed safety statements, flood watch, and then flood warning. So if you're wondering the difference, I always say a flood watch is actually a warning, and a warning means you can sit back and watch it. So that's my only way I can keep it separate. But it's trying to coordinate the same wording with what you hear from Environment Canada.
Okay, well, may I have one more question there, Madam Chair?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so in our municipality, we seem to be having lots of problems with flooding, and it's probably due to the urbanization of the area. And I'm just wondering, with the insurance providers, you would think that they would be very keen on having access to information for reduction of flood events, because we are hearing only rumors so far, that there's people that can't get insurance in our town now because of flooding, or that it's went up incredibly high. So I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity for the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority to monetize this.
I'll turn that one over to the CAO, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Member Maxwell, the first is in terms of could we do this for the municipalities? We are in fact doing this for the municipalities. So we're a partner with all of our participating municipalities, and this is why this is a big part of what we do. So this work is for the municipalities. In terms of monetizing it, this is a public service that we're providing. So part of that's funded through user fees in terms of the planning work that we do to make sure that people are hopefully not building in the floodplain areas or the flood and erosion plain area, prone areas to begin with. But then levy
is what funds John's program here to make sure that we're getting the message out and keeping an eye on those systems. So I'm not sure that it's something that we would monetize it in that way because it's a public service.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have something else, Tim, or? No, okay. Member Yurt?
Thank you. So it's great information. From a practical perspective, do you find that partnering municipalities actually reach out very often to garner information from you?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, they do. They do when events happen like Alex, so Maxwell mentioned down with bounds. They're constantly, I'm feeding them with my summaries of the data and events that went through. That they know that's coming too. Sometimes they ask a little sooner than I'm ready to hand it out. But it's kind of sometimes disappointing when the municipality asks if I have any data on that stuff. I kind of feel hurt. I do what I can to get it out there. Just it's some municipalities they're really keen, but it's usually after they've been hit with something. That they get a little more interested in what is available or how they could have done it sooner.
Right.
I do, if I see something go through and pick it up on the network, I will quickly email the municipality and say, hey, you guys better send some guys over to Johnson's Harbor because they just got nailed. So I'll communicate that way. So it's not like a flood warning or it's just direct communication.
So it would be helpful if we all went back after this meeting and said, you wouldn't believe the charts that John has.
But just go online. It's the links are there. They're fascinating.
Member Shaw?
So, yeah, I don't have a question, just a comment, this is blowing me away, and the amount of, how you've taken all these programs and worked everything together, that is not how my brain works. And I like a good Excel spreadsheet, but all those data points and to be able to graphically depict something like that is just super impressive. So kudos to you, John, and your team. And I guess I'm curious, do other CAs do this, and is everybody doing it individually their own way? Because it also seems bonkers to me that this is very important for our whole province, and if everybody's doing their own thing, that seems very redundant and inefficient.
Yeah, we're kind of unique in what we're doing here. Because we've gone the free software route and looked at doing things that way. Other CAs might have a bigger budget, so they go out to consultants to develop something. So this was back when we did the strategic plan, say, hey, what can we do better? What is it that you would like to see out there? So we've expanded the network and we've made systems to actually incorporate the data and then try to present it the best we can. Sometimes it's hard because of chart. Some people can't read a chart, but I just assume they can. So it's tough to get the communication out there. I just want to know people know that I have. I'm trying to get it out to them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's an amazing amount of work and information that John has collated here for almost no money, for very little. John's incredibly efficient at that. One of the next steps that we're looking at wrapping our brains around to how we can do this is to how can we make this visual data. And so one of the things that the team is going to be putting their heads to is, can we take the information that John's got here and turn that into a visual data on a map? So you can say, if you get this event, what does that look like? If we get this event, what does that look like? And then taking the information that John inherently knows and that he's putting into these spreadsheets and making that something that is more visual. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's something we're pretty nice.
And then superimposing it into the rain, play, rain, sand table.
Member Daley.
I read your emails when they come about, but and I appreciate it because I find that it prepares me for knowing when ditches may get clogged in the winter and when when the constituents in Georgian West may be feeling frustrated, which they certainly were last week. I just want some Campbell. I was wondering, like, you have such a wealth of information, and Tim mentioned earlier how you are found with institutional knowledge for good public operation authority. Are you finding that you're able to share this process of finding all the free programs out there and piecing them together, and probably have to update that process every now and then? Is there someone, should you ever decide, hopefully never, to retire someday, will someone be able to take this work over?
We're working on that. We now have an engineering department.
One person.
We're trying to educate them as to how. It's the one thing with the network, I know it looks complicated, but it's made up of a whole bunch of simple pieces. So it's just a matter of understanding those simple pieces and how to get it. So it's doable. It's doable to transfer the information.
When specialized individuals retire from any organization, that often leads to big gaps. So I'm sure, I very much appreciate what you're doing. Watershed and our municipalities.
I think we can all echo that. Any other comments or questions for John? Thank you, John. And actually, the one thing that comes to me as you're speaking is our education system is backwards, because I find all that fascinating now, but 50 plus years ago, you couldn't talk me into that.
Of course, it's a better question.
You're on it now that I don't need it. Okay, moving on to our now, under administration, the 2024 budget. And I'm going to turn to staff. We have 3 recommendations here. Do I need to read each of those on the floor first, or do you want to speak to this, Tim, first? Because I think there's a reason for these big split parts this way. And we vote differently on each one?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I can do is maybe speak to the recommendation, why they're laid out this way. And then if you want to read them before I go into the report.
Okay.
That makes sense?
That would make sense, yes.
So what we need to do as a board of directors, what you need to do as a board of directors, under the Conservation Authorities Act, is approve first the levy apportionment that will go to the municipalities, and then separately from that, approve the budget itself. And so there are actually 3 recommendations here. They're not an either or recommendation. The first one is to adopt the levy. The second one is to note that all municipalities are benefiting from this, from the work that the Conservation Authority does, and to advise staff to notify the municipalities of the apportionment. And then the third recommendation is to approve the budget. So that first recommendation is a weighted vote.
Went goofy on me down.
Alex, which is maybe ask you to be.
He thinks he's muted.
It's, look, it says no, that's
Oh,
the
yeah.
way. It
Oh,
does
yes,
say.
now. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Where question about you?
No,
So the way the levy, because so many members are new, I'll explain the weighted voting for the levy. So the levy is a weighted vote. So it's not a 1 member, 1 vote. It's your vote is worth the amount that your municipality contributes towards the levy. And that's based on the modified current value assessment. So if you're one of the municipalities that's 100% within our watershed, so Town of South Bruce Peninsula, Georgian Bluffs, Owen Sound, and Meaford, it's not modified at all. It's 100% of your municipalities assessed property value. It's factored into that. For the municipalities such as Town of Blue Mountains, Aaron Ellerslie, and Chatsworth, it's the proportion of the assessed value that is within the watershed. And so how this works is the higher the assessed value of property within your municipality, the more levy you contribute, the more weight your vote has on the levy vote. And so the range of this is Town of Blue Mountains at the high end.
I won't bother you again.
We're paying about 28% of the levy, and on the low end, Aaron Ellerslie and Chatsworth coming in at about 3% of the levy apiece. Everybody else is within that 10 to 20% range. So for that first vote, it's a weighted vote. For recommendation number 2 and recommendation number 3, it's one member, one vote. And so for recommendation 1 on the levy and recommendation 3 on the budget, those will be recorded votes. The one in the middle. Not something we want to record. It's not necessary.
Thank you. So I will read the first recommendation. That the Great Sauble Conservation Authority adopt a levy for the year 2024 of 1.724,165.59 million as required by Ontario Regulation 402/22. Could I have a mover and a seconder there, please? Member Farmer? Member Dubik? Is there any discussion or any questions to be asked there? So now we want to do a recorded vote on this one? I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't see your hand. Okay. So, okay, go ahead.
Well, I am just going to speak against voting in favor of it at this time. Recognize the correspondence, some of the concerns we transferred from the Blue Mountains, but I also recognize their own municipality. Rightly or wrongly, we fund it from water rates. And it is more punitive as opposed to a property tax structure to increase cost to water rate users because it's a little bit more, you are less able to control those costs. Cost of running water for brushing your teeth is equitable whether you make $20,000 a year or $120,000 a year or a 3-minute shower versus a 3-minute shower regardless of wages. So during a very difficult budget year, we saw that at the county agree in their deliberations. I still find that we've had substantive increases in the last 2 years in the general gross revenues, the Conservation Authority. And I'm not prepared to vote in favor of that levy being imposed this year at this time.
But increases in the gross revenues?
Was that your question?
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're expressing concern in the increases in the gross revenue?
The levy of 1.724 million. Being apportioned.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Matthew.
Yeah. So we did prepare a report to accompany today's budget. It's the 3rd time the budget has come before the board. So it came to the board at the September meeting for discussion. The only feedback from the board at that time was to come back with options for different rates of COLA. So in the first iteration of the budget, we had proposed a 5% COLA for staff. The board asked staff to come back to the board in October with both a 3% and a 4% COLA version. Staff did that, but in addition to doing that, we reduced that 5% COLA relative budget by about 1.5% or almost 2%, while maintaining that 5% COLA. So you were essentially presented with 3 versions of the budget in October. There was discussion amongst the board about which those budgets to go with, but staff were not provided with any further direction at that time to amend anything in the budget. And it was circulated to our municipal partners based on a resolution from the board. So at this time, we have received correspondence from the municipality of Erin-Elderslie, the township of Chatsworth, that we're in favor of the budget and against the budget respectively. So Erin-Elderslie passed the motion supportive and Chatsworth passed the motion not supportive. And since that time, I've also presented to the town of the Blue Mountains, the township of Georgian Bluffs, and the city of Owen Sound just last night. There was a resolution passed by the town of the Blue Mountains asking Member Maxwell to work with town staff and myself to see if there was a mechanism to reduce the levy increase from the proposed 5.1% to 2.5%. I didn't receive any further feedback from the town of the Blue Mountains on how that might be accomplished until this past Friday, and we've been able to connect with Member Maxwell to discuss this. Owen Sound and Jordan Bluffs, both seemed supportive at council meetings, but no formal resolutions were passed. The budget from our perspective, from the staff perspective, is very lean and responsible. As you just heard, in terms of one of our mandatory programs, is being run pretty much as leanly as we can, and that's pretty much the case across the board for our program areas. So when we look at the proposed levy increase, levy is applied evenly to everyone, because it's a rate per $1,000. So the way it works is we were at about 10.8 cents per $1,000 in 2023. We're moving up to about 11 cents per $1,000 in 2024 as proposed in the draft budget. And so where that comes into a difference in terms of what municipalities pay in levy is based on how much assessed value falls within that municipality. But what that means on a house that's assessed at $500,000 is a rate of about $56 per year per household. And that's up $1.60 a year from 2023. So what this increase in the levy proposes is about $1.60 per household based on an average household of 500,000. So if your assessed value were more or less, that would change relative to. The primary cost driving this increase in our budget is staffing. So we are a service provider and staffing is our number one resource. And I do recommend or think that we need to be cognizant of that and we do not switch. If we choose to not move forward with the levy as proposed, then we need to start looking at, if we're not going to fund a levy of that has been proposed, where are the cuts to that levy going to come from? And how are those going to be accounted for? And we can certainly look at that, but recommendations from the board in cost reductions or where, based on the budget, where you'd like to see that come from, would be beneficial to staff because we are going to have to go back and figure out where that money would come from. So at this point, one of the items was COLA. As I said, no other items were touched on or were brought forward by the board. The board did vote on COLA based on our administrative bylaws. If the change that the board wants to see to levy, if we're not going to approve what we put forward today, then the board would have to reassess that, and it requires a 2/3 majority vote to change that resolution based on our administrative bylaws. So otherwise, in terms of moving forward, the next step is to open the vote on the levy. If the vote on the levy does not pass, we're not going to need resolutions 2 and resolutions 3 at this time because we can't obviously pass the budget or a portion of municipalities without passing that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the members have.
Thank you. Now I'm going to open it up to the board. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I wasn't hearing Vice Chair Greg that you were putting a secondary motion on the floor there. So I'm going to go back to that main motion that's on the floor already and call the vote on that. All in favor?
Sorry.
This needs to be a recorded vote. Sorry, forgot that. Okay.
John,
So-
the spreadsheet to calculate it for you.
It likely does. I'll turn it over to Valerie.
So I'll be naming members by alphabetical by last name. Tony Bell.
Yes.
Chair Carlton.
4.
Member Day.
4. Who loves Laura? Yes, that's spreadsheet.
Member Dubik.
In favor.
Member Durst.
Yes.
Member Gregg.
Opposed?
Sorry, Vice Chair Gregg. Member Farmer.
In favor?
Member Mackey.
Opposed?
Member Maxwell.
Opposed?
I took it once and she went. We're just walking. Inside of that. I have.
Next door.
I'm running integrated education programs. So I did try out any picture. I used
I know. There's a lot of programs.
Great.
Yeah, I look at it.
So that is split by every. And they must say.
Oh, really? How's it going? What closure?
One of the ones I felt to share. Guy started in the country. Just take over.
Yeah, for this, so, yeah.
Let's think about what 5%. So we're. No.
Oh, yes.
So the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I.
They want to pay for it. If it will be before, I don't want three colors. I said, why don't we do it? We.
So I think you're having. Yeah. Couple of, like, they're gonna get cheaper to. I did that.
I almost count, maybe 5 minutes. Because I get it's like all of a sudden one of them stopped.
Because we also.
Yeah. We 1% road, 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful.
Yes.
But then we've already been looking at it. I don't.
Yeah.
We have.
I would just kind of check if she's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's kind of like, that's just the way it's the world.
no, probably actually managed to, they are really just on the answers. And it's got. But, I see, I saw.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So.
I just. Yes, you're great. Yeah.
No, I think it's wrong.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And I guess it's a change.
We do, but we do.
So we just added.
Okay, if I could have everybody's attention, sorry that took a bit, we had figuring. Well, it's calculating how much of each percentage went where, so. It does actually carry 53.14% to 46.86 against. So we do carry with that one, and we move on to recommendation 2 then. The good news out of that is we're not going back through that whole budget process. Sorry to hold it for together. Recommendation 2. Whereas the Conservation Authorities Act provides that an authority shall have the power to determine the portion of total benefit afforded to each municipality in establishing the annual levy apportionment, the Great Sauble Conservation Authority resolves as follows, subject to such regulations under the Act. 1. That all participating municipalities be designated as benefiting for all programs and services included in the 2024 operating budget and the 2024 capital budget unless otherwise specified in the budget. That the appropriate authority officials be directed to advise the participating municipalities pursuant to the Conservation Authorities Act and the regulations made thereunder to apportion costs to the said municipalities for the amount of the municipal levy set forth in the 2024 operating budget, to apportion costs to the said municipalities the amount of the municipal levy set forth in the 2024 capital budget and in the approved projects of the authority, and any special levy attributable to any project which has been deemed to be of specific benefit to any particular municipality. Read it. It's in your package. Read it.
So the summary note on that is that all of the programs of the authority are deemed to be benefiting to all municipalities. So that is one of the primary reasons that the levy goes by modified current value assessment, as opposed to special benefiting levy. So the Conservation Authorities Act would allow a special benefiting levy where if we're doing a project specific to a municipality, we can say you're going to pay for that, but nobody else is. So we don't have any projects like that. So this is a resolution from the board to say that all programs are benefiting all municipalities that are participating.
Before I go to questions there, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Vice Chair Greg, Member Mackey. Any questions? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And recommendation number 3, and this goes back to being a recorded vote.
Recorded and 1 member, 1 vote for this one.
So recommendation number 3 is that the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority adopt the budget as presented for the year 2024 in the amount of $4,247,593. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Shaw? Member Farmer? Is there any discussion or questions on this? I will turn it over to Valerie for a recorded vote.
And again, I'll be going by alphabetical by last name. Member Bell.
4.
Chair Carlton.
4.
Member Day.
4.
Member Dubik. In favor. Member Durst.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gray.
In favor?
Member Farmer.
In favor?
Member Mackey.
In favor.
Member Maxwell.
Favor.
Shaw. In favor. Member Uri.
In favor.
11 votes for yay.
Thank you. That is carried. Moving on, there is nothing for water management, environmental planning, the climate resilient coastal communities grant information. The recommendation here is that the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receive staff report 046-2023 for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder on this one, please? Member Urick and Member Bell. I will turn it over to you, Tim, and Tom.
Thank you very much. So I brought this, the discussion of this grant forward last month, just in my CAA update. And I thought it'd be good to have it more formally on the record with the board and to also let everybody know where we're at. So this, if you don't recall, was a regional scale project that we talked about, trying to get a grant for from Natural Resources Canada. And the goal of this project is to do a shoreline study across the entirety of southern Georgian Bay, extending inclusive of the town of Sega Beach up and around to the town of South Bruce Peninsula, and we hope So this is, so the way this grant has been submitted to the federal government is part of a even larger regional scale where we're partnering with Conservation Ontario, where there will be 6 regional scale projects done on each of the Great Lakes. Our Great Lake will be Georgian Bay, and so far as partners, we've been able to bring in almost all of the lower tier and upper tier municipalities across that range along the shoreline, as well as the Ojibwe Nation and the Toronto Metropolitan University, aka Ryerson. When I talked to you last month about this, we estimated this as a $600,000 project, and we were asking for municipal buy-in of $15,000 total spread over 3 years. Now with partnerships from TMU, as well as some more fulsome look at the in-kind investments that we'll be putting in, it's actually a $900,000 project. The cost to municipalities remains the same. Very excited about this. Toronto Metropolitan University has come forward with, I believe, about $42,000 in cash that will go towards funding either a master's student or a doctorate student to help with the project. And so there'd be a student allotted for each year of the project, as well as the professor that runs that department putting in about $60,000 in kind of her own time to be involved in the consultation and the information that comes out of it. So that particular program and that professor are focused on governance and the interaction of governance with water and water resources. So it's actually a fantastic fit. We're very lucky to have them. At this point, we've submitted the grant. So Ian put quite a bit of work into piecing this together. We're partnering with Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and their team. The goal of the project would be to have shoreline modeling and mapping done for the entire southern coast of Georgian Bay. What that allows us to do is update our hazard mapping along there. But what we're also going to do as part of this grant is look at the impacts of climate change. And those are drastic. So in terms of one of the engineers that we've spoken to who's been doing a lot of this work for both Ministry of Natural Resources, for Environment and Climate Change Canada, and for Maitland Valley Conservation, they expect that in about a 50-year climate horizon, the lake could rise between 30 and 40 centimeters vertically. And so in some of our areas, the lateral impact of that could be substantial. So what we want to do is, first and foremost, do the modeling and the mapping and see what that looks like. And then from there, do risk assessments to see what is the impact of that. And from there, have community engagement, which includes our local communities where our municipalities will be stakeholders at the table to make sure that they're fully involved, as well as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and say, how do we deal with this? This is the science, this is the reality. How do we address this? And I expect this to come back with phases of a possibility. So short-term solutions, mid-term solutions, and long-term solutions. And these will be built together into a coastal resiliency plan that the whole community is involved in developing and can help to implement after the fact. So we see EMPs coming out of this. We see that plan coming out of this. We see potential updates to emergency management for municipalities coming out of this, as well as the science to back future updates to your official plans and zoning bylaws, so that when we need to do those, we can say this is how we're going to deal with this, because this is how we need to be forward-thinking and proactive about dealing with this. So I think it's really exciting. I think it's amazing that potentially we're able to do something at this large of a regional scale, not only across Georgian Bay, but then across Ontario, with projects on Lake Superior, in the St. Clair River, on the St. Lawrence River, on Lake Ontario. So a lot of good projects, a lot of good science. And the best thing about it, I should have led off with, is that NRCan is, if we're successful, funds 75% of the project. And so what we've tried to do is put cash for cash against that 75%, and then tag on all of the in-kind work on top of that to make the application as strong as possible in terms of the value for investment from Canada. So through you, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have on that.
Questions from anyone? Member Shaw.
Through you, Madam Chair. I just a point of clarification in here. I think I read the 15,000 from all lower and upper tiers. So are the counties also being asked to contribute into this in addition to the lower tiers that are on the shoreline?
That's correct. Yeah, so we have letters of support from Bruce County, Grey County, and Cibro County.
Okay, thank you.
Member Maxwell.
Yeah, Madam Chair, may I ask Tim a question, please? When you say shoreline, how deep does that go in? I'm thinking of the shoreline, just, the shoreline, but does it go in as far as, say, the harbor in Thornbury or other harbors?
I think what we would look at is what's going to be impacted by both higher water levels and the flood and erosion impacts, so wave action that comes along with that. Specifically, how far it goes in is going to be twofold. One is going to be what are those areas of potential impact, and two are going to be in working with municipal partners, where are your areas of concern. So if your staff note an area of concern associated with, say, a harbor, then yes, that might be something we need to look at. So I would anticipate, by the nature of an inner harbor, the harbors are designed to withstand this. So part of it will be flooding, but then the second part of it will be, is the current design of the harbor sufficient to handle both that increased lake level and the waves that are going to come with it?
Thank you very much. I saw the request from, Sean Carey gave it to me on the funding. It seems quite reasonable, or contribution.
Thank you, Member Maxwell. Any Member Parker?
Chair, I'm curious about the relationship with Metropolitan University. is that pre-existing? Was that new because of the scope of the regional approach to this project? Where did that come from? And can we use it to find jobs and student people?
It's a new relationship for us. So, and this is part of the benefit of us delivering this project in concert with Conservation Ontario, is that was actually a connection that one of the senior staff at Conservation Ontario had. There's a similar project going on with this professor's counterpart at Brock University that will be working on the Lake Ontario project. And when all those pieces started falling into place for this particular professor, she looked at the other projects, saw ours, saw that permanent students could be a really good fit for it, and the subject matter that they cover of governance and interaction with water, that's a really good fit too. And so what they're concerned with, and one of the things that we'll be concerned with too, is the vulnerable shoreline communities that will inevitably be impacted if the lake does in fact come up.
Just a quick point of clarification, sorry,
Go ahead.
a quick point of clarification, for the water level rise that you referred to, is that based on where the water is now or where it was at high water levels a few years ago?
That's relative to high.
Member Durst?
Yes, Tim, when you mentioned, I'm assuming that this is being implemented with a steering committee of some sort, a major steering committee with a variety of subcommittees. When you were mentioning stakeholder involvement in the steering committee, what does that look like?
So we haven't determined that yet. Okay. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that although we're spearheading the project, this is truly a community project. So what is the first year of the project? It is a 4-year project. The first year of that project is to set up the steering committee, set up the terms of reference, define what we need, and possibly setting up the community engagement. We're unsure on that one yet, just because we don't want to set up the community engagement structure and then let it sit for a year and a half while the research is being done. And then, so that's to be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Member Maxwell, did you have another question?
I actually had maybe a comment. Seems like a very good project because it involves a lot of community partners and stakeholders. So it should be a great opportunity for Grey Sauble, Nottawasaga, and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Member Shaw?
Can I ask, is the other side of the peninsula part of another project? You mentioned there's some work in Maitland Valley. Is that as far as that's going, or is it?
No, at this point, because of the nature of the way this project is set up as pilot projects, and that's what NRCan is looking for, we had to pick an area to focus on. So there may be other grants that come forward. In fact, there is another grant right now. We just don't know if we have the capacity. We have to be mindful of how much capacity we have to take on projects, but the goal would be to take the best management practices and the learning from this and apply those strategies in the future to one on the Huron side.
Okay. I'm just thinking the elephant area, like how big an impact would be, right?
Exactly.
So I have a couple of questions, and maybe the first one's answered in here and I didn't read it. When will we know if we have been accepted? You're going to tell me it's in there.
We don't know.
Okay.
The government.
Please tell me I just missed that.
No, the grant period is from April 1st to 2024 to December 31st of 2027. So we anticipate we'd know by April. But the wonderful thing about having 3.5 years to do the project and having that first year set up as sort of staging is it's not the end of the world.
Okay. And I guess my other comment then would be, have everyone been approached and have we gotten replies back from everyone? And what happens if one or two of those municipalities choose not to participate? Do we just leave them out of the boundary?
The wave won't hit me for the parent.
Okay.
So, yeah, which is a little concerning. We had a conversation prior.
Yeah. So at this point, we have committed letters of support from all of our municipalities except the municipality of Beaver.
Bruce County hasn't, they didn't commit to funding in the letter. So, but again, we have time, so we still plan to have further discussion with the municipality. We still plan to do that section of shoreline. We can't leave a gap in the shoreline. And also talk to Bruce County. And I think Bruce County was waiting until it's approved or not. And we'll have to do the further discussions to see what that looks like. But at the end of the day, we're looking, this is not, it's important that municipalities know that this is not a GSCA project. This is a community project that GSCA is spearheading. And so the buy-in from our individual partner municipalities is quite low at 5,000 per year for 3 years, plus some staff time income support.
So I will say that, and I can't speak for Councilor Bell, but yeah, that really kind of shocked me when Tim reached out and said Beaver hadn't actually offered the letter of support yet, because this gets to be about as no-brainer as it can be. Conversation ensued was that the monetary aspect, whether it was the rate might be staffing and staff resource was the reasoning. So to that end, it begs the question, just so we're aware, what kind of staff resourcing is anticipated being required to participate in this. Regardless, we should make that work somehow, because I just can't believe it's gonna be that onerous, that it's gonna prevent something of this magnitude and this value to take places beyond scope to be. But I just don't know what kind of staff resourcing is gonna be required, and that nobody does at this point. And that definitely go back to the interim CAO to have a conversation to say what that. I'll leave it.
I guess that brings to mind another question for me then. The tank range, does that fit in as part of MEFRG, or is that federal government?
Also a very good question, and one I'll ask the CAO, well, again, under the determinations of the actual grant, did they mention D&D property?
No, so currently we probably would not have the D&D property, but we would include the area outside of it in the mall, right? So we want to make sure that the literal areas, sort of up current and down current, are factored into the modeling, but the actual physical mapping of that shore line, we probably wouldn't undertake because we have no control to do anything with it anyway, nor does the community.
So begs me to wonder that in the next that's a 3.5 year project, over the course of the term, if DCE carries through, that next 3 years is going to be environmental assessments with SON as well as D&D as well as TCE. So there might be some overlap opportunity there to utilize that environmental assessment to kind of correspond or correlate with that anyway. So there might be an opportunity to still make that work backhanded.
I was thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's an opportunity to bring more partners in.
Okay, any other comments or questions on this one? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is planning fee freeze information. Recommendation that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receive staff report 047-2023 for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Vice Chair Greg?
You can move it and speak to it.
Okay.
If you wish.
Okay. A mover and a seconder, please. Member Durst.
Just being that it's correspondence received, while it's disappointing, we still acknowledge that these are fees that, we always wonder how we can contribute to the cost of housing and so forth. It's revenues that we miss. But that said, this is indicative of Tim's good planning and good stewardship while the province was forcing some of these changes upon CAs in the last 3 years. And we had the Watson's fees and charges report done, and we barely got that in under the wire. And we are in a much better place on a go-forward basis than our partners or our neighbors at Saugeen Valley, for instance, who did not get their fees and charges done in as timely a manner. So this is just something that represents the value of Tim's efforts there, getting that work done in a timely fashion.
Member Mackey?
You know, Scott's absolutely right. Saugeen Valley is already reaching out to say that their previous budget that the board had approved will likely have to be redone. So they were just informing of, I think, an email that a new budget will have to be coming forward. They were basing it on some increases in fees and charges in the planning department, which now can't happen. So.
Yes. Member Carr?
This strikes me in my opinion on the board as like another example of what seems like some hostility from provincial levels of government to CAs generally. Are there other areas of weakness or ways in which we are vulnerable to decisions like this that limit the ability of the CA to generate funding or to maintain? But yeah, to just do what it does. I don't know if that's a question for Tim or just in general.
It's a good question. I would think Tim was probably better qualified to answer that than any of us here.
The short answer is yes, we're pretty win. So we are. In changes to the Conservation Authorities Act, whatever it was, sometime between 2020 and 2022, there were changes to the act that where previously the act said that we can charge a fee, they now say we can charge a fee consistent with the minister's direction and the minister's fee policy. And so that fee policy essentially spells out that you can collect user fees for things that benefit people that are the user fee, but the minister would pass the direction altering that. So that's what we've done in this instance is the minister has passed the direction, which last year, we got a bit better timing this time. Last year, I got it at 6 p.m. on December 28th. That everybody was on holidays, that the fees were frozen for planning and permitting for 2023. And that was a directive, that was a time limited directive to end December 31st of this year. The end of last week, we received notice from the minister again, stating that these fees would be frozen for another year. There's no rationale provided. I have taken the liberty of writing back to the director of the Ministry of Natural Resources to ask the minister or his staff to explain themselves and provide rationale for why they would do this. From my perspective, I don't think a housing crisis is rationale for this. Our fees are not substantial enough in the grand scheme of things. And we have fees now. Housing is still moving forward. So essentially what this is doing is causing the taxpayer to subsidize development, whether it's private personal development or whether it's big industrial development. And my personal and professional opinion is that's not right. And what I could have seen is if the minister had come back and said, we want to hold these fees in check for another year because of that, but we're going to apply CPI or COLA, or apply CPI or COLA to account for inflation, that would have at least been rational. But that's not the case, it's an absolute freeze. So to Member Gregg, or to Vice Chair Gregg's point is, for Grace Sauble, this is it's unfortunate, but not the end of the world because we did take steps to go through a thorough review and increase our fees prior to 2023. We did not budget on these increases to fees being in our 2024 budget simply because we suspected this could happen. So if it didn't happen, our plan was to move forward with CPI increases because the planning department is largely funded by self-generated revenues anyway. But I think Grace Sauble is fine, but it doesn't bode well across the province and it seems irrational.
Member Durst?
Yes, I just wanted to know if the CEOs of the CAs are going to be raising this at penal.
I could see if Conservation Ontario will raise their name on. The rest of the CEOs don't tend to go to AMO. But we will be asking Conservation Ontario to write a letter to the minister as well. Unfortunately, it's not likely to change.
Just remember, Maxwell, you have your hand up. Did you have a question again?
Oh, no, I thought it was lowered. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Member Shaw?
Well, it's not a question. It felt like reading this last week on like the heels of like COP happening and like there's action and people are acknowledging like we have problems here and we need to address them. And I feel like Conservation Ontario and the work of the CAs is one of the major ways that our province is able to maybe be a little bit resilient and be able to address and get in front of like what's coming. And then to read this last week just felt like a huge slap in the face. But we can buy beer at convenience stores now, so like where
You're feeling bad about it.
where, right, like it just, like this is such a, this should be our biggest priority and just taking tools away and making it harder to do the good work that needs to be done. And is done in partnership with municipalities, and it's just like, yeah. Well, it's just so frustrating.
Sorry, I'll go to Tim first.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, Member Shaw, you raised an excellent point. So under the Changed Conservation Authorities Act, the planning and permitting work that we do is mandatory. We are absolutely required by law to do it. So to kind of the legs of fund the work that we have to do seems counterintuitive, and it's certainly counter to the original changes to the Conservation Authorities Act that were about better enabling municipalities to manage costs of conservation authorities. This is counter to that.
Yeah.
Through the chair, does the Great Sauble Conservation Authority have political, intergovernmental relation policy or framework? If yes, is there a way that that can interact with the advocacy that the municipalities and the counties do? If not, is that something that we need so that we can point out the policies that impact this environmental, fiscal, social sustainability of this work in our area, that are policies that undermine that are bad? I would like to be able to say that. Do we have a way to say that? Is it helpful if we all say that?
So I would say, no, we don't have a policy in that regard. It would fall back on each of us as municipal representatives to get together at any of the conferences, anytime that we can speak to somebody that might have some sway. And that's the time we could do it. Remember, Mac?
Any member municipality could ask for a delegation and speak on this issue. And if they were afforded a delegation, then other members of the Great Sauble could also attend in support of that. But any member municipality could seek a delegation with the minister.
I'm still with this. My fear is that the ministers are driven by something other than the relationships that a consultation and anything like that would provide. I wonder if we as collective municipalities who have a vested interest in not having the fees limited so that is put back onto levy, if there's is it appropriate to make a motion to request member municipalities write a letter to our local members of provincial parliament, members, I think we cross jurisdictions here. To say, to the appropriate minister and our respective MPPs to say that we are interested in the financial sustainability and responsible fiscal management of the organization, and that policies that undermine that we find problematic. Is that something we can do? Is it something we've done before?
In my time here, I don't remember us doing it before. There's nothing to say that if the board wanted to have a letter formulated, it could be sent to the lower tier municipalities and see if it gains any traction. If they support it, right, then they can forward it on. That likely is the best way if we all agree. I mean, I completely agree that the average ratepayer shouldn't be paying for this development. I think the majority of municipalities would feel the same way, so I think it could get some traction.
And I see it not just it's this, but this, and it was Bill 23 that said that we can't use the local expertise of the conservation authorities anyway, that that there's a, 2 points gives me a bit of a vector, and the vector, I think it's bad, so.
I guess I might also suggest, like, I believe that our MPPs and MP get our meeting notices, but like, is it, I guess, how often do you interact with them, Tim? And is there value in us also requesting a meeting or a conversation with our MPP, just to remind them of all the good work and what the conservation authorities do, and specifically in Great Sauble, like what we're doing and accomplishing, so that they're at least armed with the best information to hopefully try and advocate for us as well. Waiting to AMO and the conferences is one thing, but like, they're here now in our community, and I think that's always a good step too, to make sure that like we're having those conversations at a local level too, rather than waiting, right, to go to the minister. So I don't know, maybe you are in conversation all the time.
I'm gonna go to member Maxwell. He's got his hand up again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna maybe perhaps lean on some of the more senior elected officials in the room there. Is it something that, does conservation authorities ever go to something like AMO, or, Federation of Municipalities, or Roma, and be able to have a conversation with one of the ministers?
I think that's somewhat what we're kind of tossing around right now, Member Marshall. So or Vice Chair Greg, you had your hand up?
I was just gonna say, I think we're spending a lot of time on this. This decision is not established off the scenarios of the Great South Conservation. I think our best allies here are Conservation Ontario and any allies you have in large conservation authorities like Toronto or Grand River. That's where these fees and these decisions are being driven. It's not from the status of the Great Sauble. So you can do all the advocacy you want here, but I think you're just spinning your tires. You want, your best friends are in the big conservation authorities and at Conservation Ontario. So I think it's the chair and the CAO that will learn the most and have the best input at those tables for you.
Member Urick?
Oh, sorry, may I follow up, please?
I think so.
So would there be any point in talking with or speaking with the Great Lakes Water Initiative too?
I would say no.
I would say no. I'm not sure there'd be a connection there because the fees are specific to conservation authorities. Member Urick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Logistically, when you're having those conversations, and I agree with everything that's been said, it's onerous, it's ridiculous. Having said that, these missives normally give us this period of time because, once again, in discussing these things, not only just the fact arguing the increasing fees in general, but the timing thereof, because obviously budgets are already being discussed and everything. So even to lobby to say, if you're going to make these decisions, can you make them at a reasonable time frame that it affects the budgeting process? Because already now you're determining for next year what's going to happen, and we already planned accordingly otherwise. And I'm sure some of the major CAs the larger CAs down the road, this has a much larger financial impact. So just another thing to lobby as long as that's being discussed, no matter what that body might be.
I would like to move that the board invites the relevant members of provincial parliament to a meeting to explain the importance of conservation authorities and the work of the GSCA, to express concern with the collective impact of the policy directions that limit the agency and fiscal sustainability of the CA, and to request that changes to the conservation authorities be implemented with appropriate timing to budget processes be informed.
So if I may, before we go ahead with the motion, at our annual general meeting, we would normally invite MPP or buyers.
Both MPPs, yes.
And so that might be the time to look at this is at that AGM. And to speak to both Rick Byers and Alex Brock about next steps and the impact that this is having on conservation authorities. I think that would be a starting point, and I'm not sure if anyone else has other thoughts on that. Member Day.
I hear Councillor or Member Greg, and I in some ways agree that the Toronto Region Conservation Authority will have a lot more say than the smaller conservation authorities and smaller municipalities. I also still feel like we have voices and we can choose to use them, and I would support, one letter isn't that much work, and little things do add up over time, so I would like to speak in support for a letter to the MPPs, perhaps sooner rather than later, and then following up at the AGM would be a way to get them. Sometimes people need to hear things more than once before moving.
I would just note, point of order, there's already a motion on the floor.
Yeah, to receive all that for information. So.
I wasn't making, I was just supporting what people are, I wasn't formally making a motion, but people have spoken earlier about the value of letters, so I
think maybe what Vice Chair Greg was referring to is Member Farmer was putting one on and I hadn't dealt with the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's quite correct. That's the point of order there. If I may then, could I call the vote on the first part, receiving that for information, and then we can move on with further discussion. So all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So now further discussion would be, are we going to have another motion on the floor? And if I could make one comment. One of my thoughts was the idea of sending a letter out to the municipalities of trying to get everybody together and have one municipality be the lead on trying to get a session with the minister. We're too late for Roma is over the pertinent one, or work on getting a time slot with a minister at AMO. And that gives us a good period of time to be working forward with that and have all the municipalities kind of behind us and knowing what we're doing. And Member Mackey, you've had a comment in there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in response to yours, I mean, if we're looking at AMO, then we're trying to be preemptive for the following year, which isn't a bad idea. This will be, over and done with, but then we're trying to get them re-implemented for the following year, which has merit in itself. I'm wanting, this time of year, letters, the MPP is in the area. Would it be more time effective just to reach out to them and say, you got half an hour, and chair, vice chair, and Tim, set up a half-hour meeting? He is the parliamentary assistant to finance, and a lot of this is finance driven, so it's not a bad person to be talking to. I think you might get more traction, that way than just sending off another letter that ends up on a pile. At least he knows that we're interested in this, and you can certainly let him know that how it's impacting all of the municipalities.
I'm surprised.
I would agree, and I think if we added that AGM invite in there as well, then we're kind of building up to Member Farmer.
2 points. One, I don't think it's either or. I think we can say yes and let's have a conversation with our local representatives that we have relationships with now, and who have relationships that are in some ways beholden to us. Let's do that sooner if there's appetite for a more coordinated provincial level action in partnership with Conservation Ontario and something like AMO. Yeah, great. But I don't see those as either or. And I have another point that is I totally forgot.
Oh, that's not my world. Somebody else had their hand, are you gonna have? Member Shaw.
So I guess, I don't know if it's a point of order, but do we need a seconder to vote on John's motion, or can we just give direction?
Just note from our admin bylaws that a member can't actually bring a motion forward. Two-thirds support. So
So we could take a vote, 2/3 of us can vote to allow a motion to be brought forward.
Otherwise, it would come forward to the next meeting.
So if I could, now, do I need a mover and a seconder on that, or just a consensus?
Our bylaws do say a 2/3 majority of the votes.
So you would just
Okay.
vote as to whether or not to allow the motion to stand.
But do I need a mover and a seconder for that?
You don't need a motion to vote.
No, okay, so I will just
You will put a change.
pull that vote as, is everyone in favor of allowing a motion to come forward at this meeting? All in favor? Keep that your majority, okay. Do you have the wording for your motion?
Here, we'll swing the fences. I move that the board direct staff and the chair to to send a letter requesting a meeting with our local members of provincial parliament to explain the importance and functioning of conservation authorities, particularly the GSCA, to express concern over the collective impact of provincial policy decisions that limit the, am I going too fast?
Do you have it written down?
No.
No, we have it on video.
That limit the ability of conservation authorities to be fiscally, to be fiscally responsible, that push costs onto the levy, the tax levy, and to request that any future changes made to that any future changes made to the Conservation Authorities Act or direction provided to conservation authorities that limit the ability to collect fees be provided in a time that considers the budget process of conservation authorities. There's a lot of comments.
There are.
Expresses our concern.
Why don't we just leave it? I would second if we just left it at having the CEO and the chair
Chair and vice
set
chair.
up a meeting with MPP. That would be a good starting
I
point.
accept the friendly amendment.
See how that goes, and then, at our next board meeting, we can discuss the April part. That would be, we'd have some idea what the feedback was from Mr. Byers.
I'm just talking about the meetings.
Yeah. And I think that we're looking at an invite, definitely to both at the AGM where we can all have an opportunity to speak at that one.
But yeah, I accept the friendly amendment, and revise the motion to, that the board request the chair, vice chair, and Tim, arrange a meeting with the MPPs to express hopes and concerns.
When is the AGM again, sorry?
February meeting?
January.
Oh, the January meeting.
What date is that?
So
Yeah,
again,
just give me.
expeditiously then, because
January 24th.
MPPs for January, only a month away, is gotta be expeditious.
Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder. And are we ready to call the vote on that one? Okay, all in favor?
May I ask,
Sorry, excuse me. Did you have a comment to make, Member Maxwell?
I do. I just wanted to ask the mover and the seconder, as architects of that motion, do you have our MPP Saunders captured in that? Because he represents a large part of our area.
We have the MPPs plural.
You got both of them in there? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving forward with the agenda, there is nothing for operations, conservation lands, forestry, communication, public relations, education, GIS/IT, DWSP/RMO report. CAO's report is next. Do we want to take a short break, come back to a couple of reports before we move into sessions? Into closed session?
A 5-minute recess would be nice.
Sure. I just see people getting up and walking away. That's usually much further than on the train. Okay,
Chair Carlton,
yes.
to be conscious of the time in the room.
Yes.
How long do you have the room to?
4:30.
Okay, right. We gotta go.
Fired up. Well, do you have it with you? Yeah. I'll have it with you. I can take it there. Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. Just pretty proper. Put on the box. It's just the time. It's in the class. Sorry.
Well, they really want to go to that.
So we can volunteers and yeah.
No.
So you don't have to do that. Yeah, right. I'm not trying to.
No, it's not, no.
Yeah, and then I'm starting to see, in the shop.
I'm all about it.
Because they were afraid of who we voted in from.
Well,
Your
I.
phone numbers are on the water.
Yeah. Because they've been known to send them the odd. Could I get everybody back now, please?
It's not, it won't dry up enough.
Sue, do you know what the opening line of Bob Dylan's volume as they are to change it is? The opening line is come gather around.
Okay,
Yeah. Definitely hearing about it. Definitely.
people are not listening, they're beyond listening. No. I don't have it here. But Valerie has the right idea. We have to be out of this room by 4:30. So,
Looking for an argument?
yeah. Well, I'm just thinking we're gonna, because we're a little wordy today, we might just hit something where we talk a little long. So we will move on with the CAO's report here.
Thank you. I'll be super quick. I wanted to let the board know that the English Falls Management Plan, which we've been working on for quite some time, has been formally approved by NEC and the MNRF. So obviously the format was endorsed by the board, approved by NEC, and then rubber stamped by MNR. That's all happened. So we formally have an English Falls Management Plan. So yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Big thank you to everybody who helped make that happen. And especially big thank you to Rebecca Anthony, who, as I mentioned, Rebecca's on leave now, but she has put a substantial amount of work into this project, and it's great to see it come to fruition. And this is the first management plan, well, for English Falls in 20 years, but it also corresponds with being the first management plan we've approved in 20 years. So yeah, big deal. So that's great. As I already mentioned to the board, I did attend Owen Sound Council last night. It was great to get out and speak to council and talk about our budget and answer any questions that council had. As you know, when the board approves the budget for circulation, I do put an open invitation out to your councils to come and speak. So keep that in mind in future years. I'm always happy to come up and talk to your councils about our budget. Owen Sound will just put on the docket for sure. And other things that I've been working on to bring to your attention, we are continuing to move forward with strat plan. We're working through gap analysis right now. We are working on some of the policy documents internally that will come to the board shortly. We are working on Natural Resources Canada grant that took a substantial amount of time to draw all the partners together, and then even doing the background on putting the budget and the project timelines together. And Sue and I attended Conservation Ontario Council, I believe last Monday, and I had nothing to report out of that.
Okay, and for my report, basically the same. I attended the meeting online with Tim, and I don't have anything to report back out of there. And I don't have anything else. It's been such an incredibly busy fall, but it's been with everything but Conservation Authority. So we are now ready to move into closed session. So the resolution is that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors proceed into closed session at 3:53 p.m. to discuss matters related to the following: minutes of the closed session of the regular Board of Directors meeting held on November 22nd, 2023, and CAO performance review closed as it relates to personal matters of an identifiable individual, including authority directors or authority employees, GSCA Administrative Bylaw, Section 4, XVII-B, and further that CAO Tim Lanthier and Administrative Assistant Valerie Coleman will be present for item I only. And I think actually Valerie is staying for both sections, so we'll amend that to agree Valerie is here for both. Could I have a mover and a second?